is it takes no strength not to get help. It takes no strength to not ask for help. So it takes strength to ask for help. It takes strength to say, I need some help. Mentally, I'm wounded and I lost my legs, but why do I feel guilty for not being with my soldiers? It was such a foreign feeling to not be with my soldiers. I felt naked. I felt guilty.
Welcome to Catch the Moment podcast. I am your host, David Tyree.
It is caught by Tyree. That's a great catch by David Tyree. Oh my God. This ball's thrown and Tyree just goes up for it like a basketball player.
This is a pod that is going to be exactly what it is. I'm here with husband, friend, so many, all of us would say hero, author, photographer, but my friend, Colonel Greg Gadson. Welcome to Catch the Moment podcast. Long time coming. We've known each other for a long time, and this is a movie moment for me. So the first thing I ask, and this is going to be fun, I ask every guest this to start off our show. Where were you the first time you saw the helmet catch? What were your thoughts? What do you remember? And we're going to bring, obviously, any of the audience into a lot more context, and because I could have some ideas.
Well, I actually may be the first person to say this to you, but I was on the sidelines, and I'm sure you've had some folks I was on the sidelines, and I remember just kind of watching the play and seeing Eli kind of pull his Houdini and escape and catch the ball, and you made an amazing catch. Arguably one of the greatest catches in Super Bowl history.
Yeah.
But I almost felt like I was completely calm, like I knew we were going to win. So it was just another play. Like I was just.
This is what's supposed to happen.
This is what's supposed to happen. Absolutely. I didn't have. I'm at the. I think the ball was thrown away. I was on sort of Eli's side of the ball on the defensive end of the bench. So,
got you.
But I saw it, and again, it was a great play, but in the context of where my mind was, this was going to happen.
This was
how it happened didn't matter. The fact that it was happening was what was most important.
It's cool to hear you say that, because obviously when people were asking me questions, it didn't matter because we didn't win. I didn't know it was on my head. Mm-hmm. I had no clue, and I actually had to figure out what the next personnel grouping was. So it's no surprise to me that you actually have that mindset as a leader, understanding what the goal is. So you're a man of meaning, you're a man of mission. It's like, okay, this needs to happen so we can win this game.
That's right.
That's fantastic. But this is this could be one of these dialogues where, man, we have a relationship that blends on so many different levels, from your son Jalen, your contribution to the country, your contribution to the New York Football Giants, your relationship with my receiver coach, Michael Sullivan. We're going to get into some of that.
Yep.
But I'm going to lead with something that could be heavy for you, and I'm going to try to lift up this amazing book that you just did, Finding Waypoints. And tell me, what was the name of this photo again? And I want to give you some, before I ask this question, I want to give you some context to.
Yeah, so the name of the photo is called Scarred Resilient. It was actually a photo that I submitted as part of a local veterans art exhibit, answering the question, how do veterans see themselves? And when I first submitted the photo, they said it had to have a name, and so I had to back up, and I came up with Scarred Resilient because I'm clearly scarred, but that's not what I feel defines me. Resilience is.
It's powerful, 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 and it leads perfectly into, what could be some of the weightier conversations. Like when I think about this identity conversation that people, even more so in the military, will struggle with. What you have had so many places of impact and intersection of service and meaning. What was your defining moment? Like, I know that's maybe a lot to think about and leading in, but titles really describe function, but there's been some meaningful places and meaningful opportunities to serve. So what would you say at this stage in your journey would you call your defining moment?
Wow, that's I think outwardly, you could make a great case that, being wounded and having to overcome my wounds was a defining moment. Mm-hmm. But I think actually a defining moment in my life was many more years before that, especially as a cadet at West Point. Mm. And it was my sophomore season. Nice. I had been starting the first 5 games, I believe, 5 or 6 games.
What position?
As a outside linebacker,
Let's
essentially.
Go.
And
drop the hat.
And I came into the Monday morning meeting to get ready for the next game, and I got benched. I got fired.
What?
Yep.
They benched the Colonel.
They benched me. Yep.
Dang. All right. So what brought this on?
Well, I wasn't.
Was it performance? Was it attitude? We know how
it was. At the end of the day, it was performance. I mean, it wasn't an attitude issue, but I wasn't consistent. I wasn't getting the job done. I wasn't. As a player, you got to be counted on.
Sure.
I mean, and you know what? I wasn't living up to what I needed to be doing.
Yeah.
And
standards, performance, potential, even by their standards, or maybe even your own. So, all right, let's. That's a powerful defining moment to choose. Why would you choose that, and how did that moment set the trajectory of you internally or externally?
Well, I think from that moment on, and really for my cadet life, my professional life, I understood that I had to be there every day. Like you know what? I can't ever get comfortable.
Yeah.
I think prior to that, I was the starter and I was comfortable. I'd won the position, and I won the position, but that doesn't mean you keep it.
Yeah.
And I didn't have the right mental focus about continuing to improve, continuing to get better.
This is good.
To continue to work hard and not be comfortable that I won the position. And that, there's that much difference between that and being out there and not being out there. And
sure.
And
this is so good. It reminds me of the guys who worked their way to that second contract. And by the time they're halfway through that second contract, 2 or 3 years later, they're no longer the same player. So it happens even at the highest level of sport.
Right.
And you said, what happened to that guy? He got what he wanted. He got the bag. For you at that time as a young man, well, way better to learn that lesson early. Mm-hmm. But, you got the position, and in your mind, that was the reward.
Yep.
Really powerful, defining moment, because obviously it sets the course and the trajectory of your service. All right, so even before I get to this, what was life like? Give me a summary of what was life like growing up and how you arrived at West Point.
Right. My life is so. Look, I first have to give. I have to give so much to my parents.
Awesome.
They've both passed, but born in 1945 in Walterboro, South Carolina. So,
whoa.
Born in the Jim Crow South, and
45.
And you know, I got a perspective of what their life was like and what society was like, and
Sure.
and the challenges associated as an African American growing up in the South.
Yeah.
And you know, in looking back and reflecting, one of the things that I'm truly most impressed about how they passed that experience on to me was it wasn't out of bitterness, it wasn't out of distrust.
Man, that's so powerful.
And maybe that
And it's so reasonable too at the same time, but it wasn't.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
And I think about my life now, Dave. I was born in 1966.
Yeah.
That's 2 years after the Civil Rights Act of 1964.
Correct.
So I'm just 2 years into what our what our Constitution finally is supposedly guaranteed us.
Correct.
And so I say I grew up primarily in the South of Virginia and seen racism, experienced it. Mm-hmm. But I would say that I never, ever let myself sort of go into this sort of, existence of broad brushing everything as bad or evil, but literally making an assessment of every situation on a case-by-case basis.
Oh, man, that's so healthy. You sharing that, and I think you have, in light of your entire journey, you have now a lifetime of experience to validate how healthy that is. Not just from not just from your own personal perspective, but also from the healing side of being an African American, knowing that we actually do have unique opportunities in this country that other countries might not experience in the same way.
Right.
But we do also have a road to go.
Yeah.
To get
we have work to be done in
you
order to form a more perfect union. Is what I like to rely on, because our forefathers, for all of their brilliance and imperfections, understood that we weren't there yet, but they didn't let perfect be the enemy of good enough.
They didn't let perfect be the enemy of good enough. Oh man, if we could just receive that. Every color. I mean, like, I tell people, more people are now talking about race as a construct than it is, because people are, like, obviously people come in different colors.
Right.
But, I think it's a great conversation from a sober-minded people. It exists, but more people actually are, nations and cultures and traditions and customs. Mm-hmm. Meaning, like, and I think what's very unique about the African American plight is that we were stripped of so much identity. So I think our wounds and traumas are unique.
Yes, absolutely. I think if you thought about the Native American culture who was decimated, but a lot of their culture and names are intact. I think we are uniquely stripped of our identity. I mean, Correct. Our identity begins on these shores. Our names and our culture and our traditions begin on this side of the Atlantic and not the other side, which, so many other cultures, the English, the Irish, the Germans, they can go back and they can trace the roots. Ours start here.
They start here. So it's a deep, deep conversation, but it's something I think now we're actually starting to understand. For the people who haven't, who still have the vitriol, the bitterness, the unforgiveness, the hate, these things that you're talking about, that's why they're upset. There's a way that we have to get toward this healing. And I don't know if government's ever going to be the answer, but I think we have to get toward it.
Well, I agree, and I have sort of coined a phrase that our government can only go so far in terms of they can curb behavior, but they aren't going to change hearts. And it's not their responsibility to change hearts.
Thank you.
It's us, and so we've got to do it. And I say from our perspective,
sure,
dragging and carrying hate is never going to change it.
Never. Never.
And so, does that mean we take the high ground? Does that mean that we extend the olive branch? Perhaps.
Yeah. In some instances, you make the righteous demand.
Yep.
Right. I think there's when you're as a leader in this nation, as a leader of men, you're talking about courage, conviction, and I think there's a healthy way to do it. And when I think, for lack of better terms, if we know what you're fighting for is right, then for lack of better terms, there's some you're willing to die on certain hills, right?
Yep.
But it can't be with the vitriol, the hatred, the one-sided perspective. It's really powerful. I mean, you have so much powerful perspective. So
and
now,
you would say hatred that's the devil at work.
it is absolutely.
And so it's absolute. So it can almost be counterintuitive sometimes, because even though it's justified, doesn't mean it's right.
There you go. I tell people, I said, the powerful thing about, just life, right? There's, right and wrong, but, should be a more black and white, but humans are complex. So there's objective and there's subjective, right? Because there's subjective experience and intuitive natures of people.
Right.
Right. So, and that's why I tell people, I said motives and then actions, right? Because there's only one way to hit that bullseye, having the right motive and the right action. And you got the wrong motive and the right action, it's eventually going to be spoiled milk. You got the right motives, wrong action or wrong decision, you still get spoiled milk. So your great intentions don't make up for your
justify, right?
Poor actions, right? So I think there's so much room in understanding that, man, it's actually hard to, if you raise a family, you realize how difficult it is to serve a human. Right?
Yeah.
Because they're all unique.
Well, and you have 6, right?
Seven total.
You have
yeah.
7. And you think about that, fundamentally, you probably did everything completely the same for all your kids, and they all come out differently, right?
Woo, buddy.
Yeah. You're like, man, was this guy? Did he? So it is.
So how do you arrive at West Point? You're growing up South Carolina, Virginia. Thank God for your amazing parents. Rest in peace. We honor them and their legacy because it's a part of it. And when I look at your family, it makes even more sense. So, of all places, obviously you're an athlete, so I didn't include that on the original roll call. You've done so much, photographer. I mean, but actor. Come on, Battleship. I mean, we can go everywhere with this. So, but how do you end up at West Point? And did you see that as I remember being recruited by West Point. Obviously there's Division I football, but then there's honestly, kid in my day and age, we don't know nothing. So there's legacy and prestige and all. Did you have a lens for that as a young kid?
No, absolutely. In fact, West Point was a plan B.
Gotcha.
Because I was recruited to go to. I went to officially James Madison.
Nice.
William and Mary.
Nice.
In fact, when I went to JMU, this is how much older I am than you. Charles Haley was on that team.
Get the heck out of here.
Gary Clark.
Man.
Scott Norwood. They were all on that team. Yes.
Oh my God! Because Charles, I'm the 49er fans. We just said Charles.
Yeah, they were all seniors. So anyway, but UVA was what I thought was my best choice and my best option. I thought I was going there. They told me they were going to offer me a scholarship.
Yeah.
And then at the last minute, they changed their mind.
Was George Welsh there?
That was George Welsh's first year there.
Jeez.
In fact, ironically, they had just come from Navy. And,
wow, look at that.
And so I didn't have a plan B. I literally did not have. I didn't know where I was going, and a coach, Ted Gill, for Army, a defensive line coach, had come to my high school to recruit a classmate of mine, Tracy Branch.
Yep.
And my head coach said, "Hey, why don't you take a look at Greg? He's a good football player. He's not committed anywhere."
Yeah.
And so I took a visit up to West Point and never heard of it. Didn't know what it was about. My number one question was, did you play Division I football? And they said, yep. And I'm like, I'm in.
Wow.
And
sounds like a teenager.
Well, and I honestly went there with a bit of a chip on my shoulder because I wanted to play Division I football.
Sure.
I felt like I wanted to play against the best.
Big boys, the best, yeah.
And this was my only opportunity.
Got you.
And so I was like, This is
good. This is good. Because, I mean, that makes sense how you got the starting job so quick. I mean, you had that chip. And, man, that's amazing. Now, how do you come to terms with this baptism of lifestyle? I mean, like, was your family a relatively disciplined family? I mean, you get into, I don't know what it was like, obviously through the 80s, but I mean, you're in the military, like.
Yeah, so I was, my father's nickname in college was Burner. My parents graduated 1 and 2 in their high school. My mother was 1. My dad was 2. My dad was really impoverished and didn't have enough money to go to college. He moved up here to Washington. He moved up from South Carolina to Washington, D.C. to live with his brother, who was in the Army and was stationed, ironically, at Walter Reed, where I would be eventually evacuated to, 41 years later.
Full circle moments.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so my dad, he worked in a post office. He worked as a nurse's aide. My parents ended up, so I was born, and my sister was born in D.C. So my parents had 2 kids before they finished undergraduate.
Before they finished college.
Yeah.
They ain't built. People ain't built. They ain't built like this. I'm trying to say we need some of our fathers. We need our fathers' pedigree, man.
Worked 2 to 3 jobs while going to school full time. Pharmacy school. Graduated from pharmacy school. Gosh. And so that instilled, and picking cotton growing up, and walking and plowing, fields with a mule, and so those stories set a precedence for hard work.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
And so I was a paper boy. From 10th grade to 12th grade, I delivered 300 papers every day, every morning. Got up at 4:30 every morning.
At 4:30?
My brother
I used to say those were illegal hours. I used to have something in my head to say, hey, man, between 3 and 5, nobody should be alive. I used to have that in my head, but I tell you what, you realize people are getting stuff done.
So getting up at 4:30, delivering papers, going to school. I played football, I wrestled, and on the weekends I worked in a lumber yard.
In a lumberyard.
So when I joined the Army, I didn't have to get up until 6. So I was sleeping in.
Yeah. So my dog had a reprieve when you go to the Army.
Yeah. So the aspect of, an athlete and being disciplined, getting up and being in a routine, that wasn't so foreign or germane, unprecedented for me. Joining the military.
Got you.
I think there was an inherent amount of sort of discipline and not just discipline, but, hey, look, you can overcome. I mean, you can just, you just have to.
It was built in.
Yeah.
I tell people, I was like, sometimes you have to tell people, and like I said, I'm born in 1980, so I could recall, television booming and, feed the kids in Africa. I said, well, some people don't even know they're poor until you tell them. So it's like, when your life is your life, you understand that this is what's going to take to get through to the next moment. Like, so you're working towards something, but you're not bitter about your life until somebody tells you, right? It's like covetousness. It's not until you see how well your neighbor is doing to the point where you start to feel bad about yourself. And I think it's amazing what you can do when you know, hey, this is our family and this is what we have, and this is what we're entrusted with. So we're going to work this ground until it opens up the next opportunity. And it sounds like you guys were really grounded, grateful, but also moving toward some amazing opportunities. So, all right, so you finish up at West Point, like as your career or as your athletic career begins to kind of like, what's going on in your brain about your service in this next phase from athlete to cadet to soldier?
So, I love the game of sport, football.
Of course.
And in a lot of ways, kind of look back, you say things that sort of define you. I define myself a lot by football.
Wow.
And I knew I was going to have a 5-year service obligation, and much like your coach, Sullivan, I thought I was going to do my 5 years in the Army and get out and find my way back into football, find my way some way into the game, as a coach.
Yep.
And but I actually, and that was my plan. Again, that was my plan. But I fell in love with being a soldier. I was in my second assignment where I thought I was going to get out when I was stationed at then Fort Bragg, which is now Fort Liberty. I thought,
where's that at?
North Carolina.
Gotcha.
Yeah, Fayetteville, North Carolina. I thought I was going to get out of the Army, and I fell in love. I was a paratrooper. I jumped out of airplanes for a living, and
Sully, that was our fun conversation in the wide receiver. Yeah, man, jumping out of plane, jumping out of helicopter. So, all right, like I can only imagine, right? And obviously, you know, at this stage, you've lost your limbs, but that has to be some like, how long can you do that? Like, you know, like even the impact, because I mean, you know, so many soldiers in their service, they're doing some diesel stuff that's rigorous on the body. And like, is that ever even a thought in your head? Is like, what is that mentality wise? It's like, and were you already in the path of war at that stage? Because it sounds like you was it late 80s, 90s?
This was in the mid 90s. So
Okay.
I'd already been to war once. I was in Desert Shield, Desert Storm as a lieutenant.
So you did.
So I was had already been to war, and so I guess sort of had some certain appreciation for really making sure that the folks that I was responsible for were prepared to go to war.
That's excellent. That's excellent.
So, and I had some lessons early on that really solidified that. So, I would just say, you know, there's men, there's soldiers that do this into their 40s and even 50s. You know, not maybe like the spring chickens, but you know, in my 5 years there, I jumped over 60 times, and you know, and have a few bumps and bruises that still linger with me. But
Battle tested.
yeah, but you know, it's part of what goes with it. It is there is some inherent danger in there, but I mean, there's nothing like, I mean, I'd be like chewing gum like I was talking to you right there. You know, putting my, grabbing the side of the airplane and looking out of there.
That's you. It's literally like an athlete in his element.
Yeah.
It's just like you just kind of locked in, no crowd noise.
Yeah.
Just
You're in the zone.
Hey, I'm that black dude. Ain't no way in the world you get me to jump out of plane. I'm that dude. I'm like, nah. I'm like,
well, see, never say that, because I said that, David. When I went through airborne school in early 1990 in the school, so we had to get through 5 jumps to pass the school. On our 3rd jump, someone got killed.
oh,
And me and one of my teammates, it took every bit of courage for us to complete that course.
so boy, listen, I'm not into failure, boy, but I can tell you.
And after we were done, we said we're never jumping out of planes again. And so guess what? I had over 60 jumps after I, so.
Oh God! Oh, Colonel. Listen, like I'm of the adage in the generation where like being black is a good enough sport. Like being, I'm like that's a risk. I'm like I can swim. We got some crutches in like historic. There's obviously tons of black swimmers, but I'm like, nah, swimming is cool, no problem. But white people are far more known to be more adventurous, risk takers. They're out wild. Like a lot of African American communities has had exposure and access to resources.
Yeah, it's the resources, and again, it's the mental, it's the exposure. It's you know what, I think as much as even or more than exposure, it's being able to see people you can identify with doing those kinds of things.
Boom.
That's what's sort of missing, and why it's important for us to get back in our communities and share our lives and share these experiences so they understand what's possible.
Yeah. All right, so I want to dip into there's a lot of different layers to your life, but you do have a beautiful family. I believe you found your wife at West Point.
Yep. She's my classmate. We were actually in the same company all 4 years. We graduated on 24 May 1989. Got married 27 May 1999. So we just went over 35 years.
Wow, 35 years, man! Congratulations.
Thank you.
And obviously, it's the hardest thing that most people will ever do. Like even marriage, people we don't.
It's work.
It's work. It's work. So at the time, obviously, it's not, interracial marriages aren't anything abnormal at the time, but I think that's a pretty cool dynamic. Two military-minded people, interracial, probably different backgrounds. What was the bumpiest part of that dynamic? Because you're operating in this sphere where you both have these type A minds, probably different backgrounds. Like, come on, give me some underbelly,
so
brother.
some of it's in the book, but it'll talk about the first time that I told my wife, or my future wife, that I liked her, and I told her we were studying Arabic, and I decided to tell her I liked her in Arabic. So I
think that's pretty smooth. Put some respect on his name.
And she got up and walked out of the room.
Now, what's her name again?
Kim.
Kim, come on, Kim. Kim, I got to talk to her. Kim, you got to watch this. That's smooth. Yeah. I mean, I know y'all got 35 years in now, but that's smooth.
Yeah. So,
but you know what? Liana played me out too.
And so we literally didn't talk to each other from that point for well over a year. She's from Missouri, and I was like, well, she's hillbilly girl, whatever. So I left it alone. I wasn't going to bark up that tree again.
Yeah.
And if I saw her coming, I went the other way. I was like, I didn't want to have anything to do with her. I wasn't angry. I just she
played me. She played me. I gave her some game.
Yeah. So I didn't have a whole lot of confidence, honestly, back then.
It's a real thing. We'll talk about that a lot. I was the same. That's why I drank alcohol. I couldn't deal with the rejection.
Yep. And so I didn't pursue it anymore. And so a year plus later, her roommate convinced me to go to the movies with her roommate and another friend. I didn't know Kim was part of the thing, and so that's that ended up kind of being our first official date. I didn't even realize it was a date until much later in the evening. We went out and we had some dinner and went to a movie.
Yeah.
So then she kind of, I'd say she initiated the comeback.
Okay.
So this was in October of 87. I proposed to her in August of 88, and we got married in May of 89.
Man, so, and I think marriage, like I said, I tell people, marriage is a merger, and it's not a partnership. It's a merger.
Yeah, no,
and if you look at a corporation that merges, there's a lot of stuff that got to get tossed. There's some consolidation.
That's right.
Right? Like,
it comes with baggage, right?
It comes with a lot more, right? So we understand usually because no one's really telling us this. But like in light of those type A personalities, what were the hardest things in those, especially in those early formative years in the marriage, being in military, starting off these professional careers as well? And obviously it's great to have a companion. That's without a shadow of a doubt. But, what was it backgrounds or was it mentalities? Was it stubbornness?
I think it was in some ways sort of competition.
I love it.
We were both, as you say, kind of type A and wanted to do a great job at work and put it all in and consequently, since we were always putting it all in, sometimes there wasn't a whole lot of time for us, and
it's good.
And or we couldn't they didn't necessarily synchronize. And so, when I had when my schedule was relatively easy, hers might be more challenging and vice versa.
Sure.
Sometimes it felt like she would go to the field and I wasn't in the field, and I would go to the field and she wasn't.
Sure.
And so, those kind of things again made could make times frustrating, and I wasn't always the most understanding for sure. So
I think it's the journey to that. By no stretch of the means does any of us arrive in perfect understanding, but I think it does take some of the impasses as a maturing man. Most men have some. I say I think I've always
want things our way.
There you go. I mean, you're wired to lead. you're wired to be a little stronger. When I say stronger, you're meant to be physically stronger, a little more emotionally stronger. You're wired to carry certain burdens. But I think when I look back in previous generations, how we actually exercise that is we're learning how to be more in tune with the emotional side, be more available, learn how to be a listener. All the things that be vulnerable, make dynamic leaders. We're starting to learn these things, but they weren't accessible.
No, they weren't vogue back then.
There you go. So, we got Brene Brown and all these wonderful people talking about all this stuff at a high level. What's going on, everybody? David Tyree here, your favorite Super Bowl 42 champion, author of the greatest catch in Super Bowl history. But here's the catch for today. I want you to take a moment, think about what it's going to take for you to unlock the next step of mastery within your team, your organization, even your small business. Visit davidtyree85.com and check out some of these keynotes. Elevate integrity. Talk about self-awareness as a superpower. How to position your managers to be more self-aware and well-positioned for growth, advancement, and sustainability. Oh my goodness, Real Men Work. This is geared toward all of our men having the right attitude and disposition about work. This is for everyone looking to be the best, the peak pinnacle parent, the peak pinnacle father, the peak pinnacle leader. Make sure you check that out. And my absolute favorite, The Art of Being Coachable. This is something that all of us need. We lean in on humility, self-awareness, accountability, and how to be adaptable. Make sure you check out the website. We want to be an absolute asset to your growth and your high performance. davidtyree85.com. As you go through your career, let's get kind of into the, now there's so much talk with mental health, emotional health, like all these different things where it just wasn't, we didn't have the same grip and understanding, nor we weren't interested either. Right? Like we were a heavy testosterone.
Yep. I don't want to hear about it.
I don't even want to hear it. Right.
Yep.
It was perceived as a weakness for so long, but now in 2007, which I still I can't believe you actually showed up for us 4 months later after this injury. You have this injury on the battlefield. You're now double amputee. How many quarts of blood? You gotta run through how many quarts?
I went through 129 pints, 129 units of blood the night I was in the first 6 to 8 hours after I was wounded.
Oh my gosh! Oh my goodness! It gives me a whole different lens of I'm a man of faith of the blood. The blood
the average human holds between 6 and 8 units. 6 to 8 units is what
we hold in the body.
Yeah.
And
I went through 129.
Okay. That brings that's more. I hope everybody got this. Life is clearly in the blood. It's hard for me because this stage of your life, I can my sister served 13 years military. Her husband served 22. Thank God they had, did a tour, but minimal interactions in war. Like so when I listen to this, it's like, okay, it's beyond me, but. At that stage, when you hear these conversations of how do you toggle, because I look at my perspective on physical strength and the necessity of it, and men and leaders and leading their home and leading their teams is even more so in the military. Mental resilience, right? The very things that made you a dynamic leader and fit to lead men, not just lead men into war, but lead men.
Right.
But also we're having these conversations that it appears as if they're also creating a crutch to kind of substantiate weaker mind, hypersensitivity.
I got you. Yeah. Like
how do you look at this? We know that, we're pendulum swingers.
Yep.
Give me your perspective in light of a man who's had I can imagine severe PTSD. I can imagine severe emotional traumas. And whether it was before or after the injury. Mm-hmm. Give me some of your perspective in light of some of the darker moments that you've experienced.
Great question. Thank you. So, I think me overcoming, when I talk about overcoming my injuries, there's the physical part, and I've often said that the physical injuries, they heal way more quicker than the than the emotional or the spiritual, the soul injuries, the mental injuries.
Yes.
And so they're on a sort of incongruent sort of a track. And I will tell you, as a male, I probably first focus on my physical injuries. I think what really came next was sort of my spiritual, believe it or not.
Wow.
But my mental injuries were the ones that, again, I had never had to rely on somebody to sort of validate me. In other words, going and talking to a mental health professional.
Yeah.
And my wife, Kim, she actually explained it the best way. And in fact, when she said we need to get some help, was that she says she would use this, and she's used this before publicly.
Yep.
But you've moved in your life, right? You've had movers move you from one place to the next.
Yep.
And she uses that analogy. She says, well, you get a professional to help you move from a place that you need to move to. And I said,
good.
And that's how she used to talk about a mental health professional helping you move mentally from a place that you don't want to be to a place that you need to be.
So good.
And that is what nailed it for me. It's what sold it to me.
Excellent.
But also the realization that, David, we don't do anything in this life by ourselves.
There it is.
Again, I tell men all the time, because it takes no strength not to get help. It takes no strength to not ask for help. So it takes strength to ask for help. It takes strength to say, I need some help.
So and that's power.
Right.
That's exuding power.
And so when I tie that to where we are in society, I still say, look, there's no excuse. Look, we got to get the job done. Now, if you need some help, get the help you need.
There we go.
But don't sit here and say, I can't do it, and you don't get any help. Now, I got no toleration for that.
That's excellent.
At the end of the day, things still got to get done. You got to perform. You got to get your job done. And, what you were born with or what you don't have at the end of the day is irrelevant.
Yes.
The world ain't going to stop.
Yes.
So, that's what you need to face, and that's what we need to face and say, okay, let's keep it real.
Yep.
But how are we going to get to succeed?
How are we going to get
there? Ain't
there?
no excuses.
Yeah. I love you actually sharing that. It actually reminded me of, my decline, and I haven't talked about it a lot. My decline, I had an injury right after the Super Bowl, and I come back and I start having soft tissue injuries, which I never had ever in my athletic career. And so Giants cut me, and I'm over with the Ravens, first day of practice, and first day with the Ravens, I strained my hamstring again. So we had a bye week, so I had some time to kind of recover, but it sucked. And I duked it out with God in the hotel room. I'm like, really? I had one of these real moments, but it made me think of it. And when I got back, I was probably somewhere around between 80, 85%. And the Giants and the Ravens had different philosophies. I'm sitting over there. It's Ed Reed, it's Ray Lewis, it's Todd Heap. And Ed Reed is literally probably my favorite players of all time. And I can't wait to get to war with these dudes. But the trainer, he's like, how you feeling? It's like, He said, well, listen, man, we're gonna have to put a little ace wrap around this thing, because you got to go. Now, the Giants never told me that. They just would rest me up. And what I realized, you can still...
Yeah, when you tape your hamstring, you can
still get to work, right? And I think part of that is with the building mental resiliency. Although you're impaired, you can still flex those muscles.
That's right.
And so, it's like, no, you're not going to get the perfect optimization. We're not going to get you back to 100 before you can start blowing, because that's what would happen. I get rested, I come back, and I tweak something again. And you were
haggling over 2% of your performance, right?
Man, it was
and people say, I hear athletes all the time. I like to listen. I can't wait to get back to my form. I said, look, you never get back. You're already using the wrong word.
Yeah.
Because you're chasing something that you may never
That you
get.
might not
and you'll never know whether your 99% is good enough because you're chasing 1%.
There you go. There you go. And it's a powerful place. So, when I think about it, but you're the toughest of the tough by God's grace, and I think you would say it by, God's sovereignty, being able to be saved from this injury. All right, now I'm going to give some timeline. This actually happens in June 2007.
May
of 2007.
May 7th.
How are you arriving at a hotel to talk to the New York Football Giants?
Yep. So
that could have been September. It had to be September, October. It's like the third game of the season.
Yeah, it was third week of September.
All right. So.
Yep. So your coach, my
Sully,
my great friend Mike Sullivan, he so it actually kind of and it's a weird thing because I say maybe the Holy Ghost was talking to me even before the deployment because I called Mike up in January before I departed.
Wow.
I called him up and just said, "Hey, I'm proud of you."
It's amazing.
And can you imagine 6 months later he's visiting me in the hospital?
Oh boy.
6 months later he's visiting me in Walter Reed, and he had when he was departing from that visit in June or July. He says, anything I could do? And I said, well, you guys come to town. I'd love to see you play. And he said, sure, no problem. So the third week of the season, you guys started out 0-2. He calls me up on a Monday and he says, you still want to go to the game? And I said, yeah. And he asked me how many tickets I needed. And I said, 4 for the rest of my family. And then he called me back on Tuesday and he says, hey, I want to run this idea behind Coach Coughlin, but I need to know if you'd be willing to do it. And I said, would you be willing to talk with the team before the night before the game? And I said, he asked me. I said, sure, why not? So he ran the idea by Coach Coughlin. And Coach Coughlin apparently said, yeah. Now, again, what's unusual about this is Coach Coughlin has never let anybody outside never let anybody outside the Giants ever address the team.
No.
So
no.
I'm so
not in the team meeting.
But I don't know this. I don't find this out until years later that not only that I was the first that he ever let outside the organization talk to the team, but then, after I talked to him, he dismissed the team. I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, no, it was no after because he's typically the first in the team meeting. So I remember him introducing you. You talk, and we typically go for offensive meetings. We have some special team stuff, and after you share,
he and Sully were the only ones that knew. I don't know if you remember that. You guys were in a room, and they brought me in the side that was at the front of the room, so none of the coaches even knew.
Wow. I mean, like, for us, everything like that is definitely a surprise. So, I mean, you never know what Coach has up in store. But, I mean, that's the beginning of a story where your story, we want to talk about significance. We talk about we were 0-2. We got blown out the water by Dallas and Green Bay.
Yep.
And if we don't find a way to win this game against at the time the Redskins,
who were undefeated,
who are 2-0, and we obviously end up not just winning the game, but in a dramatic fashion.
Yep.
Goal line stand.
Yep.
And we just knew, and I couldn't say it at the time, but I think we knew that not only was that significant, but getting a chance to see you reemerge in our story as a part of our story, it was a shift. And we actually not just won that game, but we won 6 games straight. What did that do for you at that time? Maybe you might have walked out of there thinking, hey, this is just a one-time thing. Like, what's going on in your head and your mind?
Yeah, no, I thought it was a one-time thing. And I was, so maybe the sort of, I'm still, again, I'm battling.
Yeah.
Mike would call me up and he say, hey, the guys are asking about you and they want to know how you're doing. And I was honestly like, yeah, you're just being nice. I didn't, I love you too. I had not thought that I did a damn thing.
Wow.
And it wasn't until, in fact, I never went to another regular season game. And And then the first game I went to after that Redskin game was the Tampa wild card game.
Okay.
And I flew down before you guys, and I just waited at the hotel. And when you guys went to practice,
Yep.
and when you guys came in, and I was in my prosthetics, and I saw the look on your face, that was the first time I knew I was one of you guys. Like,
it's amazing.
Like I was like, holy shit, this is real.
This is real.
Yeah, like
This is real.
yeah.
I mean, and I can tell you what, my memory's always shot. Like, I've always been somebody like so stuck to the present, like locked in. And I think the place where I knew you were there, it was the Green Bay. You were at the Green Bay game as well.
Yep.
And that was another historic game in the middle of the run. But I think it was so special. So, you know, like, what is that like? You know, like when you think about, because there has to be so many different levels of like when you're internalizing what you're enduring at this time. Because I'm mind blown thinking that in May you have this accident incident where you're on the brink of death, to 4 months later and months later you're sitting around with some. So like the seesaw, you got to give me some of the seesaw. Like, I mean, like, you know, you got guys who have either died. You've led men in battle who have lost their lives. You know, talk to me. Is there ever guilt? Like,
yeah. So I will tell you. I'll talk to you about guilt first. I told you there were a lot of emotions that I didn't have. I didn't have hate, but I had tremendous guilt. Like, I failed. Can you imagine? I'm like, you know, mentally I'm going, I'm wounded and I lost my legs, but why do I feel guilty for not being with my soldiers? It was such a foreign feeling to not be with my soldiers. I felt naked. I felt guilty. And what you guys became for me was my team.
Wow.
And this is not something that many people have ever heard, David, but you know, so the Tampa game, I had to go back in the hospital for more surgery, so I missed the Dallas game.
Jeez.
And I remember getting out of surgery, and I tried to call Mike, and I couldn't get through to him, and I left him a voicemail. Do you remember Coach Coughlin playing that voicemail before the Dallas Cowboy game?
Only now because you said it.
Right. So he played this
Voicemail.
drugged out voicemail of me saying I missed you guys because I felt part of you, and that was part of what I shared with you on that voicemail. Man. So then I'm still in the hospital after the Dallas game. Wednesday before the NFC Championship game, Coach Coughlin calls me and says, I want you to be the honorary co-captain with Harry Carson.
Ooh.
And I'm like, I'm going to be there. So I get out of the hospital on a Friday. I fly to Green Bay on a Saturday.
And you're like a paratrooper all over again.
And you know how cold that game was. So I'm 2 days out of the hospital. And they said, and they had a place for me to go up in the box. And I said, no.
Because that's what
here.
I remember.
I'm
You're
like,
on the sideline. Now, who was with you? Was Jay?
Jay was pushing. Because I couldn't even, they had operated on my arm, so I couldn't even push myself in my wheelchair.
Oh, man.
And I remember, I remember him pushing me out for the coin toss.
He must have been a miserable little teenager.
He was freezing. I'm like, shut up. You know, I'm like, man, you ain't cold. Quit complaining. But they had Green Bay had a nun that they had wheeled out for their on their staff, and I remember thinking they had God on their side.
We got a soldier, but they got a nun. No.
Yes, they had a nun out for the coin toss in a wheelchair.
Oh, listen, the soldier prevailed. The spirit of the soldier prevailed.
Yeah,
man.
and you know, of course, we won that game, and then, but the part I really wanted to share with you was it was literally after the game, after the Super Bowl, after we won, and my burst of excitement and elation, actually turned to quite a bit of sadness right away, because I thought it was over. Like, I didn't think I was gonna
right away.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm never gonna be with these guys. It almost reminded me of my last football game as a college football player.
Wow.
I started crying. We played the University of Alabama. In fact, Howard Cross was on that team.
Hojo.
And I remember going, you know, I'm never going to be on this field with these guys. And I was, but you know,
sadness.
I say Coach Coughlin renewed my contract.
He did.
Yeah, so.
He did. He loved you, and you know, I think, like I said, as a young athlete, you kind of sit in these seats and you know a part of something special, but you can never understand it because you're kind of like living in it. And you probably have, you know, with some of the depots and transitions that you have had in meaningful spaces, it's so healthy to get acquainted with it. But it sounds like really what everybody's looking for is a family, right? A community.
Something to be along to, you know, something you can contribute. And you know what? I reluctantly finally accepted that I had some small contribution to that season. And
it wasn't small. It was literally wind behind the wings. And you know, there were so many different factors. And what I love about that Super Bowl run is there were so many perspectives of dramatic change. Coach Coughlin's story of his shift as a leader, being a listener as much as an authoritarian.
So here's a question I have is, so those weeks after I mean, was it something that you guys leveraged off of that I said and repeated, or what? You know, what was the?
I think after listening to it, after going out there and fighting, because we know what we're fighting for, going out there fighting and receiving the reward of it, and even more so in such a dramatic, division game, goal line stand,
right?
The defense having a validating moment after being kind of disgraced. I think it set us right. I can't remember any personal talk, like, recurring talk, but I'm certain it happened though. And you rip off 6 games straight, and obviously you're feeling good. But just like any other story, it has its own stories, and we end up going 4-4 in the next half of the season. So, I think when I think about it, Greg,
you kept losing at home. You were winning on the road.
There it was.
You couldn't
win at home.
You got comfortable at home, right?
Couldn't win at home, but it was the disappointments. It was some of those, but it was the relationships. And I think we talk about what makes a championship team, what makes a high-performing group of people. It's the care that you have for one another. Mm-hmm. It's when someone feels heard. For players, we weren't getting that from Coach. So now he creates this leadership council, and we actually have the perception, at least, or the reality of being a seat in the table. He considers me as a person, not just as a performer. So those were some of the dynamics that I think it started with you. Coach was willing to do things different, mm-hmm. and inviting someone into his chamber, mm-hmm. to take the lead.
Telling folks that he loved them.
Yep, and it's like, oh, you're a person. He was a cyborg. The dude is he's still a cyborg, but he's a father figure. Whether you like it or not, you're dealing with men that are, 70% of us are coming from a lot of fractured homes. Like, football was the surrogate dad.
Yeah. Well, you guys are alumni, Syracuse alumni, and his head coach was a paratrooper and a Silver Star recipient.
I heard about that,
which I think is really, kind of, again, it's sort of like maybe that was part of why he said yes.
I'm certain, and just knowing Coach, he's a big reader, big historian, big military. It's all in his DNA. So I don't think it was a hard sell, but I think he gets significance, like the significance of your contribution to our country, the significance of contribution. When you talk about a team, I think he at that stage in his career he got that.
But to me, the most profound part of it was that he trusted me with his team.
Yeah,
I mean, he didn't have an audition speech. He didn't even ask me what I was going to talk about because I couldn't have probably told him. My wife drove me to that meeting that night.
Yep.
I had a blank 3x5 card. I did not know what I was going to talk about.
I can't remember what you talk about. All I know is I think I was in awe. I was in awe of that kind of courage because I personally didn't know anyone with that level of involvement or that level. You hear about it. It's all distant. I literally love those movies, even though I know they're movies. It's like. It actually emits emotions from it.
Right, yeah.
It's like
you understand the intensity. Black Hawk Down.
Yeah, one of my favorites.
Saving Private Ryan. A Lone Survivor.
That was intense.
Yes.
So all right. So it's just like when we have that exchange, it's like I love the different perspectives on that season, the different levels of contribution. Because when I think about the story, this is what made it such a powerful story. How do these lowly giants beat these ginormous undefeated Patriots? And it was because of these themes, these shifts, these changes that really, I call it the wind of God was blowing behind the scenes. I lose my mother right after the Washington game that we lose at home. Mm-hmm. So it's just little themes that were knit to that in a really powerful way. And the subtitle in your book says A Warrior's Journey Toward Peace and Purpose. And this is the first time I'm seeing this book. But I believe every man in the world, especially, is looking for peace and purpose. How, you talked about the healing process. How have you arrived to that place in light of, I can imagine this roadmap of healing internally, emotionally. How has peace and purpose been defined for you at this stage?
Wow. So peace and purpose. I think, I'm 58 years old and
spring chicken.
Yeah, spring chicken. And I think the sort of perspective about legacy, although I would have never used that word 17 years ago, but when I was selected to command a battalion, to lead a battalion.
Explain to us how many soldiers and what.
So I was a commander of an artillery unit. So a typical battalion in the Army is an organization that's probably between 300 to 700 soldiers.
Man,
and mine was on the smaller end, so it was a little 420 or so soldiers at the time. Yeah. And my goal in leading this organization was to have an environment where they could be their best. Mm-hmm. So they could become their best selves or be their best selves.
It's excellent.
And want to continue to serve. That was just, and so that is, I think, the beginnings to where I am now, where I say my purpose is not about what I accomplish or accumulate, but what I leave. Because I truly believe what we leave is what lasts.
It's good.
So my goal is about giving. I don't need to take anything away from me.
So good.
Is it wisdom? Is it experience? Is it my understanding of my faith and how? A lady asked me last night after a speech, how do I forgive? Well, I told her. I told her how I forgave. I forgave because it unencumbered me. It was God that lifted that off my shoulders, and I understood that He was the only one who could have taken that away. I mean, it was like,
yes,
I'm not just alive. I'm unencumbered.
Wow,
That's free.
Freedom.
I'm free.
This is so powerful. Oh my God. Because and this is why I tell people, there's a powerful, powerful scripture. There's no law against love. And what happens when love invades, it sets you free. So even when you're justified, so like, how do you turn the cheek? Even when you're justified, Love has the ability to set you free.
Because there's nothing that you can do to me. And so look, I mean, I'm 41 years old, and I now understand that in life, there's nothing that any person walking on this earth can do to me.
You walk through the valley of the shadow of death, literally. You know, a lot of Christians, we say it figuratively.
Yeah.
You walk through it.
I did. He took me through it.
Talk to me about the soldier's prayer that we'll find in this book and what preempted this powerful prayer at this moment of crisis.
So I'm going to begin the answer with a little bit of sort of a rhetorical question, but sort of my faith journey. I was raised in the church.
Go for it.
So, I mean, I'm not sure if you asked me how strong my faith was, I could have ever answered that question, like before I was wounded. Like, how strong is your faith? I don't know. How do you, 10, 9? I don't know. I honestly, now, first of all, you see, I have a cross under here, and I had these. God, I'm going to go back a little bit early now.
So good.
David, trust me. So,
my God.
When I was in the first Gulf War, Desert Shield, Desert Storm in 1990, my mom, God rest her soul, she sent me a cross. This tiny little cross. Very simple, nothing ornate about it.
Yep.
And I put it on my dog tags. And while I was there, I actually had a soldier wounded. I actually rolled a Humvee and landed upside down. You know.
What?
Yep. Walked away.
Jeez.
I get back home safe and sound. All my soldiers get back home safe. And I said, well, you know, I took the dog tags off. I said, these are my deployment dog tags. If I ever deploy again, then I will. Then I'll wear I'll have these dog tags. So, 2002, I went to Bosnia. I wore them. Got back home safe.
Praise God.
In 2004, I went to Afghanistan.
Jeez.
Wore them. Came back home safe. Had a rocket probably explode about 50 meters from me when I was in Afghanistan once. Whoa. Came back home safe. Now I'm in Iraq in 2007. Had those dog tags on.
Sure.
And we were wearing body armor that pressed against my dog tags, and it broke my dog tag. And I lost my cross. David, I felt naked. So does that partially answer?
Context.
I was like, and I crawled around looking for it, and I just gave up. I'm like, but I felt like I was missing something.
Yep.
I didn't say anything to anyone, and my mom sends me a care package, and in the care package, she sent me a coin, an angel coin. On one side of the coin was an angel, and the other side had my name on it and a cross.
Wow.
I put that in my wallet, which I wore around my neck.
Okay.
And the other thing she sent me was this woman's hair clip. It was a steel metal hair clip that had an angel on it.
Gotcha.
And I'm like, what am I going to do with this thing? And part of me, I think I actually might have just discarded it. And I didn't feel right about it. I pulled it back.
My hair clip.
And so I finally got the idea. I had my driver welded in the crossbar of our Humvee windshield in our vehicle. And so,
nice.
So let me tell you, when I was hit by the improvised explosive device, that angel's coin was around my neck, and that weld was in the vehicle.
Was in the vehicle. Was
I traveling with angels?
Oh, man.
So let me get back to the soldier's prayer. So
sure.
I'd seen my brigade commander. I got J.B. Burton. He was the commander of the 2nd Brigade, 1st Infantry Division.
Love you, J.B.
I watched him once before he went out on patrol, and he would get his guys in a circle, and he said he would just pick one of them. They would say, "Your turn to lead the prayer today."
Yeah.
He didn't ask them what their religion. He just said, and I liked that. And I said, you know what? I'm going to do that. And I started doing that. And so I went one time before I had picked Brown, and he recited the soldier's prayer by heart. But I didn't pick on them all the time. It was always random. Sometimes I led the prayer.
Sure.
But so when I was blown out of that vehicle on May 7th, 2007, as I laid down on the ground, before I lost consciousness, my last thought was not on my family. I said, God, I don't want to die here, and I lost consciousness.
Man.
Now, from where my vehicle stopped to where they found me at was about a football field.
Oh my gosh! We can't conceive it. A football field.
And so Brown, First Sergeant Johnson resuscitated me. He found me. He's the one that. So first of all, when they saw my vehicle get hit, he was the one following my vehicle. So he was the first one to arrive at my vehicle when it finally came to a stop. The people in my vehicle didn't know I was gone. First Sergeant Johnson found me. He recognized that I was missing and found me, started to resuscitate me. And Private Brown was a young soldier that put the tourniquets on my legs.
Wow.
The doctors give him credit for saving my life.
Wow.
So now they put me in a vehicle. They get me in a vehicle to evacuate me, and Private Brown's in there. I'm laying down in the vehicle. My head is in his lap. And while we were going back to where they could administer some more medical aid, I asked them to say that prayer. And that's why it's in there.
Yeah, I think it's just kind of fitting in light of, you have knowledge and wisdom at every level. I probably only have one more thing I wanted to ask you, but I think it's kind of fitting. I've never known of these things. There's a million things I've never known. But it says, Almighty and present power, short is the prayer I make to thee. I do not ask in this battle hour for any shield to cover me. I seek no hope to smite my foe. I seek no petty victory here. The enemy I hate, I know, to thee, dear Lord, is also dear. The vast, unalterable way from which the stars do not depart shall not be turned aside to stay. The bullets fly to my heart, but this I pray, be at my side when death is drawing through the sky. Ron Paul's Almighty God, who also died. Almighty God, who also died. This is an early encounter for me. Thank you for sharing this gift of a book. I've been born again for 20 years, and so I'm about one of the most bold followers of Christ, and I've had the gift of loving your son. It's a powerful time to me because there's nothing more powerful than the love of a father. And our relationship extends on so many different levels because it was your love and your concern for your son at a pivotal time where I gained a type of son and got a chance to get knitted to this Gadson family. But I've really realized that the love of God and the love of an eternal Father, right? Even in that prayer, it acknowledges that even my enemies, he loves them immensely.
Yep.
There are wars that are being fought for maybe trivial things, but everybody wants to go home to their family. Everybody wants to go home to an environment where they can receive and perceive the love that God has through these amazing people.
David, as you read that, I say it dawned on me, honestly, we were talking about that's a prayer of forgiveness, the prayer of acceptance. And so that was the prayer. That was lifted off of my heart. The hate of my enemy. There was no hate.
Praise God.
I mean, think about it. I just listening to you read that, I'm like, that is what he answered. He answered that prayer.
Yeah. It's just so powerful because everybody's still in the same fight internally, wrestling with our sin, wrestling with the discontent, the maladies of our humanity and our weakness. But our enemies are experiencing the same thing. And if we can forgive and be forgiven, if we can believe that God would forgive us, if we can believe that the death, burial, resurrection, and ascension is enough to heal our hearts, then we could actually be free and walk in the peace and purpose that you have found. But I think your story, and there's so many levels and angles to God's love, you being able to at least apprehend that measure and still have mountains and years to overcome and heal, right?
Yeah.
Like
it continues. It's a journey of healing. It's not like, you don't get to some spot and you say you're healed no, because, there's the internal, I say, sort of healing.
Yep.
But I think as I continue on, the fact that I'm sharing this
there you go.
It provides a greater healing, not just for me, but an example. It's part of our charter as Christians to can share that testimony, right?
Man, I mean, and just at every level. So I'm just indebted to God, and like I said, I've been privileged to see. I think so many of us, we come from different families, like different starting points, and we have a lot of resentment around what we didn't have, and it just wasn't given yet. And when I get a chance to look at the Gadson family, hearing the legacy of your parents and what they did to establish a generation for you, and now I look at your children. Talk to me about what it's like at this stage for you being a grandfather, looking at your grandchildren, and you have two of the most beautiful, intelligent children that are still young and finding their way, but are stable and healthy. So I didn't want to, end this without giving you a chance to frame that out and what that means to you at this stage, considering where this all started.
Yeah, I have tremendous love and pride for them and how they've taken control of their lives and pursuing their dreams and raising their families. They were asked, we talk about my service and we focus on my service, but it was the service of my family, including my children.
Yes.
And at a difficult age, 13 and 14, they were rock hard in providing me and giving me unconditional love. I mean, David, I'm not talking to you if I don't have the love of my family. And they had to step up.
Yeah.
I mean, they had to step up. I mean, this is not, this is a pretty devastating change of everybody's life. I mean, and on a multi-dynamic way.
It is.
And they never wavered, man. They never wavered. And so, but you know what? Them beginning their lives and starting their families has given me life. I in 2019, I got diagnosed or became a type 2 diabetic. And, I had this mental resolve that I could just take it on and defeat it. And I was gonna put it in remission, and that lasted for like 6 months, and I was going in the wrong direction. And David, I was like, what else am I going to have to deal with? I'm blown up now. I'm a diabetic, and maybe I'm just not designed to live a long life, and part of me wanted to give up. And I think I was this close to just, and I had a good doctor, but the news of Jalen's and his wife Elena's pregnancy, and
it's amazing.
And the chance of being a grandfather was what I grabbed onto to get fit to fight again.
And so, let that out, brother, because it's hope.
Yeah. So
I said every man needs a reason, and you actually need a reason to wake up every day.
Yep.
And
they're my purpose.
Yeah.
So
they're your purpose. Well, like I said, I'm always in prayer for you because, like I said, in light of these sovereign God decisions in your life, these angelic encounters, there's more. I just got to encourage you as a son, as a co-laborer in the Gadson family. You got me as an extended son, but also I look at Jalen in a similar fashion, spiritually having a chance to see God do some miracles in his life. Man, Colonel Greg, you're just getting right, and you can beat diabetes. but it takes help. Just like you are.
No,
like
I'm in good shape. I just had my best physical
God.
in April of 15 years. I mean, it's part of my life, and I'm fine with that. But I'm living healthy. I feel I'm in some of the best shape of my new body's life.
That's right.
So I'm
I tell people I'm a big believer that, everything's possible. Meaning and that's mostly with our decision making, with agreeing with what's right. I'm not an anti-medicine or anything. I'm like, well, shoot, these even with our wounds in the human experience, God made us fearfully and wonderfully made. If I can understand better what He designs, the way He designed me and what He desires for me, then I can make those shifts and adjustments. If I don't know and I'm not interested, then good luck.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
We kind of shooting craps.
yeah, you're right.
But man, I'm in love with your life. I'm thankful to have been imparted by your life and your story, your contribution to the country, your contribution to me personally, your contribution to the Giants, your contribution to you. It's one of the best stories, and I'm thankful to be a part of it at every measure, even to the extent of being an extension of your family, man. Just share with, like I said, the list of functionality was most impressive, and I think what was actually even just as impressive is how educated you are. Like a lot of times people look at a soldier, and you have a master's, I believe, in policy.
Yeah, from Georgetown.
From Georgetown, you have your master's from Webster's, and obviously you graduated from West Point, so you got 2 masters. I'm like, this dude left nothing. I mean, like, there's so much worthy of imitation in relation to, because once you become a soldier and you've actually made the highest sacrifice, that's all people will see you. It's like, and there's so much more to you. Your legacy extends as a son, as a husband, as a father. And I think that's where every man is going to find their greatest rewards, because you've given that to your family. And I just want to keep celebrating you. Tell people where they can find and what to expect from you as you continue to move forward. I know photography is a big part of your passions, and just where they can find you.
Well, I'm my book, Finding Waypoints, is you can find it in Barnes & Noble. You can find it on Amazon.
Get her done.
Just Google it. We've gotten, I'm proud to share it. We've had a few recognition awards as first-time authors, as in the military war history, in the spiritual category.
Awesome.
So we're super excited about it. It's a 16-year project. So
amazing.
There's a lot of personal evolution that you'll see in that. I'm David, I literally am a proponent of really living life in the present, and so for me, it's just about being where I'm at and not really worried about where I'm going.
Excellent.
My purpose is to be my best every day.
I love it.
And as I was recovering, I sort of figured out that, all of my opportunities from the Giants to movies to continue to serve, all were born out of being present and being my best.
Excellent.
And you know what? You just leave the rest for God to figure it out.
Listen, everybody, be present, be your best.
Be at peace.
Be at peace. I tell people, do your best. This is one of my sayings. Like, it's like, you have good to me. You have. It's kind of like, when I think about, there was always these suffixes. The suffix in our words, where it's like, you can get you can be great, you can be greater, you can be the greatest. The powerful thing about your best is you can be. And then there's your best. The extension of being is your best.
Yeah.
But so do your best, but you could always get better.
Well, another way said is, don't be satisfied with being the best. Be satisfied with being your best.
Excellent.
I mean, you could be the best in a room for the idiots. I mean, so be your best. Live up.
Real talk right there.
That's right.
That's America right now.
Yeah.
All our pundits.
And you know, going back to that moment I shared to you, I was only content at being the best. I wasn't content with being my best. And that's why I got fired.
Well, you rose up from the ashes like the mighty phoenix, and your legacy is continue to go forward. So everybody, be your best, be present, get better, trust God every single day, and get great done. We'll see y'all next week.